Good morning, dear students. Welcome. Welcome for the online teaching program organized by Gokhale Education Society. And I am Bhushan Sudhakar Patil, PS Patil, teacher in HL High School English Medium, Ozhar Township. Dear students, as we all know that because of the spread of coronavirus, that is COVID-19, we cannot go to the school and take our education, and that's why our society has decided to provide education to the students through online education program. And now I am, as a social studies teacher, I shall teach you history, civics and geography for standard 6th.
Today we are going to study history, and we are going to study second lesson, sources of history. Dear students, in previous lesson we have studied the Indian subcontinent and history. Here we are going to study the different sources of history. This lesson we are going to study with the help of 6 major points. The first point is sources of history. A number of objects used by our ancestors still exist. Some inscriptions from past have been recovered. These sources help us to understand history. The customs and traditions, folk arts and folk literature, and historical documents help us to understand history. All these are known as the sources of history. These sources are divided in 3 types. First one is material sources, second written sources, and third oral sources. So let's study the second important point, that is material sources, the type of sources of history. The artifacts, articles, monuments or their ruins are called material sources of history. There are different kinds of researches going on throughout the world, and different articles and monuments and artifacts are found in excavations, and they are called as material sources. With the help of those articles, those monuments, artifacts, the lifestyle, the traditions of that particular time, the conditions of that time, the social structure of that time can be understood. So they are material sources of history. Third very important point, written sources. In the Stone Age, people have recorded many events and expressed emotions in paintings on rocks. Later, man used symbols and signs to record thoughts. Thousands of years later, scripts was developed. In the beginning, man wrote on potsherds, unpacked bricks, by using painted objects. He also used bhurjpatra, back of beech tree, to write. As man's knowledge and experience increased, he began to use various forms of writing. The proceedings in the royal court were recorded in writing. The edicts, decrees, and deeds of kings were inscribed on stone or copper plates. Many forms of literature such as poetry, plays, books on social and religious subjects, travelogues, and scientific writings developed. All these together form the written sources of history. Next very important point, oral sources. OVs, folk songs, folk tales, and similar literature are passed on from generations to generations by word of mouth. The author of this unwritten literature is unknown. Literature preserved by oral tradition is the oral source of history. We all have heard so many stories from our ancestors, our grandfathers, grandparents, grandmother, and these are the oral sources. The fifth point, sources of ancient Indian history. We have a large number of material, written and oral sources of ancient Indian history. Material sources are artifacts and structural remains. The written sources include the stone inscriptions, copper plates, Harappan seals, Vedic literature, Jain and Buddhist religious texts, travelogues of the foreigners, literary and non-literary works. Vedic, Jain and Buddhist literature, which was earlier in oral form, is now available in written form. However, the tradition of rote continues. And the last very important point, precautions to be taken while writing history. It is necessary to take precautions while using these sources to write history. These precautions are: 1. Very important, critical examination of written documents. The documents must be critically examined. And the second, cross-checking of conclusions from various sources. When the historian finds some conclusion, he comes to the conclusion, then he must cross-check the conclusions from various sources available around.
Now we have studied the lesson or topic, and you have to review it at least 1 or 2 times, and you have to read the text also, so that you can get what you have missed. And of course, you have to answer the questions given in the exercise. So dear students, I hope you have understood everything what I taught you. So stay home, stay safe.